We've discussed the issue of AES and Ecowas, and I've got new perspectives about the concerns that the three countries have in respect of their relations with ECOWAS. And so I assured Mr. President that at the next ECOWAS meeting, I would pass on what they have explained to me to the other leaders. I think there's a breakdown of trust amongst the leadership. It will take time to rebuild it, but we have to work on it so that we restore trust and confidence with each other so that we can work together, even if we are not part of the same regional body. Discuss the issue of our economic relations in respect of trade between our people, free movement of our people between our countries, and how we can improve the transit trade through Ghana.
It wasn't just another diplomatic visit. It wasn't just another handshake between leaders. When Ghanaian President John Dramani Mahama met with Captain Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso once again, the stakes were higher than ever. West Africa is changing. Alliances are shifting. Power is being redefined, and old systems are breaking down. But what happened behind closed doors? What did Mahama hope to achieve? This wasn't just a meeting. It was a confrontation between two visions of the future. One is rooted in traditional diplomacy, the other in bold defiance. So what did they discuss, and what does this meeting mean for the fate of West Africa? Let's find out. The two leaders talked about many important things, and one of the most important topics was Ecowas. Burkina Faso's withdrawal from Ecowas was not just a bureaucratic decision, it was a statement. A statement that the rules of West African politics were changing, and that the alliances forged decades ago were now being questioned. But in the corridors of power, every decision carries weight, and every departure leaves a void. As President John Dramani Mahama sat across from Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the air was thick with unspoken realities. Could ECOWAS repair its fractured foundation? Or had Burkina Faso set a precedent that others might follow? For Mahama, the mission was clear. Diplomacy had to prevail. Having served as a mediator in several regional disputes, he knew that ECOWAS was facing its toughest test yet. Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso had walked away, forming their alliance, the Alliance of Sahel States, AES. It was a radical move, a direct rejection of the West African bloc's influence. But why? Why would these nations risk isolation in a region where cooperation has long been the key to survival? The answer, as Traoré made clear, was sovereignty. For too long, Burkina Faso had been bound by the dictates of a regional organization that, in his view, had failed to protect its members. While insurgencies spread across the Sahel, ECOWAS remained, at best, ineffective, and at worst, compromised. Burkina Faso, like its allies, had grown tired of waiting for solutions that never came. Instead, it chose action. It chose independence. And if that meant breaking away, so be it. But Mahama saw things differently. He understood the frustrations of these nations, but he also understood the cost of isolation. The Ghanaian leader had spent years advocating for regional integration, economic partnerships, and a unified West Africa that could stand strong in the face of global challenges. ECOWAS, despite its flaws, was still a vital institution, and if there was any hope of reconciliation, it would start with dialogue. That was his message to Traoré. Not to demand a reversal, not to lecture, but to listen and to understand. Yet understanding does not always mean agreement. The meeting between Mahama and Traoré revealed two fundamentally different visions for the future of West Africa. One saw cooperation as the path forward, while the other saw self-reliance as the only way to break free from external control. Burkina Faso's departure from ECOWAS was not just about policy, it was about identity, about who controlled the fate of African nations, and about whether the region's future would be written by its leaders or by forces beyond its borders. Still, Mahama remained committed to his role as a bridge. He assured Traoré that Burkina Faso's concerns would be heard at the upcoming ECOWAS summit. that discussion would take place, that perhaps in time, there could be a new understanding between those who left and those who stayed. But Traoré was not a man of hypotheticals. His country had already made its choice. The question was, would ECOWAS evolve to address the real concerns of its members? Or would it cling to an old system that no longer served them? As the two leaders concluded their discussion on ECOWAS, there was no dramatic resolution, no sudden agreement, just two perspectives, each rooted in conviction. Then they also talked about the crisis unfolding in Sahel. The Sahel burns with a war that has no front lines, no ceasefires, and no clear enemy. What began as isolated insurgencies in the deserts of Mali has now metastasized into a regional crisis, swallowing villages, cities, and entire nations into its chaos. Burkina Faso stands at the center of this storm. For Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the war is not just a security threat, it is an existential battle for the survival of his nation. But standing before him is a man who has seen West Africa in times of war and peace. President John Dramani Mahama is no stranger to the cycles of violence that have plagued the region. The question remains, can this war be won? And at what cost? Burkina Faso's struggle against insurgency is not new, but its intensity has reached unprecedented levels. Armed groups, once confined to remote areas, have now embedded themselves into the fabric of the region. Their weapons? Not just rifles and explosives, but fear, disinformation, and the deliberate targeting of communities to fracture national unity. The enemy is not one organization or one ideology. It is a constantly shifting network of fighters, smugglers, and mercenaries, exploiting every weakness in the system. For Traoré, the failure of previous governments to contain the violence was a direct reason for the military's intervention in governance. The old ways of relying on external forces, UN peacekeeping missions, or Western advisors had proven ineffective. Instead, he had taken an uncompromising stance, arming local militias, deploying the military deep into insurgent territory, and making it clear that Burkina Faso would not be a passive victim. It was a bold, aggressive approach, and it came with risks. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Mahama listened intently as Traoré laid out his vision for security. The Ghanaian president understood the dilemma. The international community often spoke of counterinsurgency in terms of strategy and funding, but the reality on the ground was far more brutal. It was not just a matter of intelligence reports and tactical operations. It was about the men and women who lived in constant fear of attacks, about villages wiped out overnight, about roads that were no longer safe to travel. Mahama had seen the slow creep of insurgency across the Sahel, and he knew that what was once a problem for one country could quickly become a crisis for all. And yet, there was a deeper question lingering beneath their conversation, one that neither leader could ignore. Why did insurgency flourish in the first place? How had armed groups managed to carve out power in regions that should have been under government control? The answer, as both men knew, was more complicated than just the presence of extremists. It was about the failures of governance, the alienation of communities. The economic desperation made rebellion more appealing than loyalty. For every insurgent with a gun, there were 10 more people who had lost faith in the state itself. Mahama stressed the need for a regional response. Insurgency does not respect borders. Why should the fight against it be any different? He advocated for stronger intelligence sharing between nations, coordinated military strategies, and a commitment to preventing extremism at its roots. But Traoré had heard these arguments before. In the past, Burkina Faso had waited for regional cooperation, for ECOWAS security interventions, for peace talks that never materialized. That patience was gone. His government was no longer waiting for solutions from outside forces. It was acting now, on its terms. Mahama understood the frustrations. The diplomatic response to insurgency was slow, often too slow to make a real difference. And yet, he also knew that no nation could fight this war alone. Even Burkina Faso, with its defiant spirit and growing self-reliance, could not afford to be isolated in a conflict this vast. The conversation shifted to the role of external actors. France, which had once been the dominant counterinsurgency force in the region, had been pushed out. The United States was reducing its presence. Russia, through private military groups, was stepping in. China was taking a different approach, focusing on economic stability rather than military intervention. The landscape of influence was shifting, and both men knew that whoever controlled security in the Sahel controlled the future of West Africa itself. As the meeting continued, Mahama offered a diplomatic perspective. Burkina Faso, despite its break from Ecowas, could still build security partnerships in other ways. Through informal agreements, through bilateral defense pacts, through a redefinition of what regional security cooperation meant. Traoré did not reject the idea outright, but he remained firm in his stance. Burkina Faso's fight would be on its terms. The war in the Sahel is not just Burkina Faso's war. It is a war for control, for influence, for the soul of West Africa itself. As Mahama and Traoré parted ways, one thing was certain: the battle was far from over, and the decisions made in the coming months would determine not just the fate of Burkina Faso, but the future of an entire region. Because in the Sahel, peace is no longer an expectation, it is a prize that must be fought for. Now comes economics. It's a topic that can't be ignored. In West Africa, politics and economics are inseparable. Trade routes are as strategic as military positions, and access to resources determines the fate of nations as much as diplomacy does. As Captain Ibrahim Traoré and President John Dramani Mahama sat across from each other, their conversation moved beyond security and diplomacy. It turned toward the foundation of every nation's survival: the economy. In the end, no matter how strong a leader is, no country can sustain itself without a thriving economic engine. At this moment, both Ghana and Burkina Faso were looking for answers. At the heart of their discussion was a simple, pressing question: how could Ghana and Burkina Faso strengthen economic cooperation despite political tensions in the region? For Mahama, economic collaboration was a lifeline, a way to ensure that trade continued even as regional organizations fractured. For Traoré, economic self-reliance was the future, a way to free Burkina Faso from dependence on external forces. The challenge was clear. Could these two approaches find common ground? Burkina Faso and Ghana may be separated by borders, but their economies are deeply connected. For decades, Ghana's ports have served as a gateway for landlocked Burkina Faso, allowing it to import and export goods with relative ease. The port of Tema, one of West Africa's busiest trade hubs, has been a crucial transit point for Burkinabe businesses. But with Burkina Faso's recent withdrawal from Ecowas, uncertainty loomed over trade policies, tariffs, and border regulations. Would goods still flow as smoothly as before? Or would new restrictions complicate an already fragile economic partnership? Mahama emphasized Ghana's commitment to maintaining strong trade ties, assuring Traoré that Ghana's ports would remain open to Burkinabe importers. But the conversation did not stop there. Traoré, always looking ahead, proposed something bigger. Could Ghana and Burkina Faso create a more direct trade corridor? One that bypassed the bureaucratic hurdles imposed by external organizations? The idea was ambitious, but not impossible. One proposal on the table was the expansion of transit agreements that would facilitate the movement of goods between the two nations. This included reducing customs delays, improving cross-border transport infrastructure, and even establishing a direct Accra-Ouagadougou flight route. For Burkina Faso, whose businesses often struggled with long and costly import processes, these measures could be transformative. For Ghana, strengthening trade with its northern neighbor could mean new economic opportunities. Electricity is the backbone of modern economies, and for Burkina Faso, energy has long been a challenge. Unlike Ghana, which has a more developed energy sector, Burkina Faso has faced frequent power shortages, limiting industrial growth and economic stability. The meeting between Mahama and Traoré brought a renewed focus on this issue. Could Ghana increase its electricity exports to Burkina Faso? Ghana already supplies a portion of Burkina Faso's electricity, but demand continues to rise. Traoré was interested in expanding this arrangement, ensuring that Burkina Faso could secure a more reliable power supply. But beyond just importing energy, Traoré had a bigger vision: energy independence. His administration had already begun investing in solar energy projects, seeking to harness the vast potential of renewable resources to power Burkina Faso's future. Mahama, recognizing the significance of this shift, suggested a collaborative approach. Ghana, with its experience in hydroelectric and thermal power generation, could provide technological and infrastructural support for Burkina Faso's energy ambitions. The idea was clear. Rather than merely relying on energy exports, Burkina Faso could build its capacity, with Ghana as a strategic partner. But there was another factor at play: Burkina Faso's decision to pivot away from Western-backed infrastructure projects. Traditionally, energy deals in Africa have been shaped by foreign interests, with international organizations controlling funding and policy direction. Traoré, however, had made it clear that Burkina Faso wanted to chart its course, leveraging its resources for domestic development rather than relying on external lenders. Would Ghana be willing to engage in a new model of cooperation, one that prioritized African-led solutions rather than Western-controlled initiatives? It seems like it. Another major topic in their discussion was fuel supply. Ghana, a key player in West Africa's petroleum industry, has long been a transit hub for fuel shipments destined for Burkina Faso. But in recent years, logistical issues, fluctuating prices, and political tensions have complicated this arrangement. Traoré was interested in stabilizing this trade, ensuring that Burkina Faso had a consistent fuel supply without being at the mercy of unpredictable market forces. One proposal discussed was the expansion of Ghana's petroleum transit corridor, allowing for more efficient transport of fuel to Burkina Faso. This would involve improving storage facilities, refining transport routes, and possibly even negotiating fixed pricing structures to shield both nations from market volatility. For Mahama, this was an opportunity. Securing a stable fuel trade agreement with Burkina Faso could strengthen Ghana's position as a regional energy hub. At its core, the conversation between Mahama and Traoré was about more than just trade deals and infrastructure. It was about the future of economic cooperation in a rapidly changing region. Could nations like Ghana and Burkina Faso build economic partnerships outside of Ecowas? Could they create trade agreements that were based on mutual benefit rather than external regulations? For Mahama, regional integration was still the ideal path. He believed that economic unity was essential for long-term stability. But Traoré represented a new generation of leadership, one that was willing to challenge old economic structures and explore alternative models of growth. His vision was clear: Burkina Faso would not be dependent on any single institution, country, or organization. It would forge its path on its terms. As the discussion drew to a close, both men understood that the road ahead would not be easy. Economic partnerships require trust, consistency, and long-term planning. But despite their differing approaches, one thing was undeniable. West Africa's economic landscape was changing, and those who adapted quickly would shape its future. Because, in the end, politics can shift overnight. But economic power, that is what determines the fate of nations. In West Africa, economic survival has long been dictated by external forces: foreign banks, Western corporations, and international institutions that control the flow of capital. But under Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso is rewriting the rules. His government has made one thing clear: the era of dependency is over. The country will not beg for aid. It will not wait for handouts. It will build, produce, and finance its future. As Ghanaian President John Dramani Mahama sat down with the young leader, he saw firsthand the scale of this transformation. The question was, could Burkina Faso's bold experiment in self-reliance work? Burkina Faso's push for self-reliance did not mean isolation. While the country was moving away from Western dependencies, it was simultaneously forging new partnerships with nations that aligned with its vision. The Alliance of Sahel States (AES), formed with Mali and Niger, was one example. But beyond regional partnerships, Burkina Faso was also deepening ties with emerging powers that offered alternative economic models, nations like China and Russia. Mahama recognized the significance of this shift. For decades, African countries had been forced into alliances dictated by former colonial powers. Now, they were beginning to choose their partners on their terms. The implications were massive, not just for Burkina Faso, but for the entire African continent. Yet, despite Burkina Faso's determination, challenges remained. Transitioning to full economic independence required careful planning, and not all sectors could be overhauled overnight. The country would need skilled labor, advanced technology, and strong governance to ensure that its ambitious reforms succeeded. As Mahama listened to Traoré's vision, he saw something that went beyond just Burkina Faso. This was not just one country's fight for independence. It was a potential blueprint for African nations seeking to reclaim control over their resources and economies. The meeting between Mahama and Traoré was not just a diplomatic discussion. It was a glimpse into the future of Africa. A future where nations no longer begged for aid, but built their prosperity. A future where resources stayed in African hands. A future where self-reliance was not just an ideal, but a reality. So, could Burkina Faso become a model for other countries looking to escape Western financial dominance? Let us know in the comments section. Could it prove that true self-reliance is possible, and will Mahama join? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.